Hi, I'm Mr. Rip, and I want to welcome you to DOW2 Retribution. There's a couple things you should know if you're going to get into this game. Firstly, how do we find a game? So, you have your campaign up here. I don't really like it, but that's okay. You might. It's a good way to practice the basics of the mechanics. Last Stand mode, which is its own thing, and we'll talk about that later. If you want to play against other players, go to the multiplayer tab. Find a game will not do anything for you, because nobody plays matchmaking anymore. So don't even worry about this. If you want to find a game, you're going to go to custom games and you can make your own, or you can go to public and browse other games that are up. So you'll see the game name here, the map that's being played on, who the host of the game is, the win condition or game mode, how many observers are there, and how many players are there. You can also host your own game right here. Enter a game name, blah. And now I have it set so it immediately makes me pick what faction and what commander I want to play, as well as what skin. If you want to pick a different faction and commander, you can do that by clicking on the profile picture right here. Use the drop-down menu to pick your faction. Select a skin right here. Pick your commander. The different commanders within each faction will have different global abilities right here. So, as an example, with the Chaos Lord, he gets Malignant Blindness, which makes everybody blind, but the Plague Champion gets Touch of Nurgle, which makes things explode and heal friendly units nearby. The commanders and their unique abilities will dictate the strategy that'll be most optimal to play. So, for example, with the Space Marines, the Tech Marine is a little bit more focused on using vehicles and armored units. The Apothecary is a healer, so he goes well with tanky melee units. Force Commander is a melee unit himself, and he does well with buffing lots of infantry. So look for synergies between the commanders on your own team. You can also just select random right here. It'll give you a random race and random commander or hero. You won't be able to see which commanders the enemy team are using, but you will be able to see their faction. Once you've selected which faction and commander you want to play, make sure you press Set Ready in the bottom right. Once everybody is readied up, the host can start the game instantly without having the 10-second cooldown. If anybody switches factions or unreadies, it'll reset the countdown. On the top left here, you can select which map you want to play. It's going to indicate the size of the map and how many available player slots are on the left over here, just like all Relic games. So 3v3 games are much more popular than 2v2 or 1v1. They're also a little bit more forgiving, and they're kind of a better environment to learn because you have teammates to help you out. So I would recommend starting with 3v3. Argus Desert Gate is the most popular map by far. Everybody loves this map. It's very easy to play. It definitely has an established meta to it. You can find ways to break that, namely literally breaking the walls, which I'll show you later when we go into more map dynamics. But for every map you pick, there's going to be these numbers in the top left, and they indicate the spawn locations. So I am slot number 1, and if the starting locations are set to fixed, that tells me where I'm going to spawn. So I would spawn here in slot 1. If I wanted to be over here, this would be slot 3. Most people play with starting locations set to random, so that that element of strategy is not there, and it's a little bit more, I guess, fair in case one team is a pre-made of 3 people that all know each other and the other team is random, right? So usually starting locations are going to be random. Everybody pretty much wants to play 500 points. It's the standard. That's kind of what the game is balanced around. 250 points and 1000 points are both also very fun and have their own metagame to them. Starting resources. You should pretty much always play with standard. High resources is not going to teach you about, you know, resource management and stuff like that, but it will help you experiment with different units. Usually if you're playing Annihilate, you should play on high resources, because in Annihilate the only goal is to destroy the enemy base. The victory points aren't there, and honestly most of the resource nodes on the map don't matter because you start with 10,000 requisition and 10,000 power. So I would recommend standard and victory point control at 500 points with random start locations. And honestly, you're going to play a lot of games of Argus Desert Gate. I feel like Angel Gate is also a very balanced map. That's a good one to learn. Argent Shelf, it's a bit symmetrical or asymmetrical, so that one's going to be a little bit more difficult. Ashes of Typhon, nobody plays it. There's nothing wrong with it, just no one plays it. Calderis Refinery, also symmetrical. This one feels a little bit more like a cage match though. There's not a lot of distance between the players. Capital Spire is an interesting map entirely based around choke points, so also not recommended. Capital Spire Redux doesn't have as many choke points. Or I should say, it has way more choke points, and so there's more entrances to everything. Judgment of Carrion is similar to Argus in that it's very lane-based, so that's a good map to learn on. Sycharis Plateau really emphasizes movement, so you'll need to build transports or make teleporters or have movement abilities to be able to keep up in the match. Also really emphasizes grouping up in the middle of the map, so this one is heavily team-based. Tiber Outpost, it's difficult to play. It's very open like Sycharis Plateau, but less about the grouping up. Typhon Arena, it's also a choke point map. I don't think it's very good for new players. White Walls of Calderis is good. It's also very choke point based, but it's very spread out and doesn't really reward you blobbing up with your team, so it's a decent map as well. For the most part though, I would stick to Argus Desert Gate and Angel Gate if you want a fair game. And the rest of the 2v2 maps and 1v1 maps are their own thing, so we might talk about that later, but for now we're going to focus on 3v3. So you can move around the slots over here on the right. You can invite your friends, which will bring up the Steam overlay. You can close a slot or open it, and you can add different bots. The easy computer is going to do like basically nothing. It's useless, right? Normal computer is a little bit more active, hard computer more active and smarter. Expert computer is still not very smart, but very active. The main difference between the computers is how much resources they get, where the expert computer gets an obscene amount of resources and tends to focus a lot on trying to capture the entire map. So this will help you a lot with map awareness and controlling resource points. Map control is what it'll help you with. Not so much team fighting and using your abilities very well. If there's another player here, you can request to swap slots with them. It'll be down here, but these are bots. If you need to move players around, it won't work with the bots, but let's say there was a bot or a player in slot 2 and I wanted to open that up so another player could join specifically that slot or that team. I can actually close the slot and it'll move them to the next available slot. So you can do this with the observer slots where you open these up and then close a slot so that there's no available spots and it puts them on observer. And you can actually kind of control who's on what team like that if you're the host. And usually you should do that if you like want to play with your friends or you want to make sure that the match is pretty well balanced, which is not a guarantee. Down here in the bottom left, we have a chat box. That's actually available on the main menu as well. If you're in a game, let me show you. If you're in a game, you also have a match chat right here and a general chat. You can maximize this and see all the players that are online. Right now there's 500 people online. That's actually much higher than usual. And 74 users in chat. Sometimes you'll be able to find games here or ask people to join your game. There's the game history here. This shows replays that you've saved, player stats, and the leaderboard. The leaderboard means nothing because nobody plays ranked anymore. The player stats also similarly don't mean anything because when you go to spectate or look at another player's stats, these are frequently just inaccurate. They're just wrong. You know, like this says that I've won 2 games and lost or no games with Tyranids in 1v1. I never play Tyranids 1v1, so these stats are just made up, basically. They also change depending on which mode that you select up here, so it's odd. Don't trust these stats, they don't mean anything. The most useful information you can get from these stats is the army level. Usually people will just display as level 1 in something, but if it does display them as level 60, then at least you know they have some experience in the game. Game options. Here you can adjust your mouse scroll speed and a couple advanced control mechanics. So sticky selection basically just allows you to deselect a unit or not. So I have it set to off. Squad event queues, that's just your units responding to like getting upgraded or reinforced. Grid hotkeys. This one is critical. I feel like this is actually mandatory. If you don't play with grid hotkeys, the hotkeys are going to be assigned to keys that are logical but spread out all over your board, all over your keyboard. Grid hotkeys groups them all off of QWERTY, right? QWERTY. That goes for unit building as well as general abilities. So if the unit has an ability and you have grid hotkeys on, it's basically always going to be on Q, and then its second ability will be on W, etc. Push to talk, turn that on so you don't spam your mic. Advanced subselection. This allows you to subselect units in a group of units to activate the abilities of individual units. Import stats, that'll bring it in from Dawn of War 2 and Chaos Rising, so shouldn't need to worry about that unless you are coming over from those games. This here, do not show hero selection when entering a multiplayer game. I have this turned off, so it does show hero selection, so I always pick what faction and commander I want to play before I ready up. Download and show other players' custom badges, it's totally up to you. It'll put their badges in a folder. Graphics, obviously, set these to whatever you can run. I would just recommend that you turn off rain detail, because on some maps where there is rain, it's so thick that it obstructs what's going on the screen, and it's actually just not worth the effect. So just turn that off, turn everything else to whatever you prefer. You can run a performance test down here to get some average and max FPS settings, and that can help you tweak things. Audio, you know, pretty straightforward. One thing to keep in mind when you're playing Dawn of War 2 is that this game is 12 years old. And what that means is that there's a lot of very veteran players here. The player base is not that big anymore, and in general, the only two types of players you're going to run into are these veterans that have been playing since the game came out, or people that are just starting the game out because they got it on a free weekend, or they bought it on discount, or they're just getting into Warhammer, right? So you have those two dichotomies of players, and this makes it very hard to find a balanced match. So what I would recommend is, if you want to figure out how experienced a player is, click on them, go to their player profile, and that'll bring up their Steam profile. And then you can actually see how many hours they have played in the game. And that's going to be your best metric to discover how experienced a player is, and thus how balanced the match will be. Don't be scared of playing against better players. There's a lot to learn from them. But also, don't be discouraged, because if your team gets completely stomped, it's probably because the teams weren't balanced. And you just need to try and fix that on the next game. You can even, when you make the game, you can give it a title, and you can say, you know, 3v3 new players only, or noobs only, or, you know, that type of thing. You can put whatever you want in here. So sometimes you'll see people put 3v3 experienced players, or 60 plus, meaning army level, right? Pay attention to that. And if you do feel like you want to play against better players, make sure you let them know. Like, hey, I'm new, can I play with you guys, or whatever. When in doubt, just make your own match and say 3v3, noobs only, type of thing. And that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoy your time in Dawn of War 2. I'm going to turn this into a series, I think, and try and make more videos teaching you how to play. This game has a steep learning curve, but I honestly feel like this is the best Warhammer 40,000 game in existence. That's it for this video. I'm going to be making more of these. If you have a specific topic on Dawn of War 2 that you'd like to learn, put that in the comments below. And I hope to see you in the next video.